You are listening to How to Get Over Your Ex, episode number 217, Eat, Pray, FML with Gabrielle Stone. Welcome to How to Get Over Your Ex, a podcast on getting over your ex without it just taking time. I'm your host, Breakup Coach Dorothy. Let's turn your pain into power and your heartbreak into happy. Welcome, Braveheart. I'm so excited you're here to listen to the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast. This is the Netflix of breakups, short, powerful, and actionable episodes that help you along your breakup journey. If you're interested in a more hands-on approach, I'd love to invite you to check out our free on-demand video training called How to Fast Forward Getting Over Your Ex Without Wasting Months or Years Feeling Jealous, Angry, or Unlovable. You'll learn how to stop letting your ex live rent-free in your mind, even if you want to get back together later, how to absolutely be sure that your life will be better than the one that you had with your ex post-breakup without it taking time, and lastly, the secret to feeling completely neutral about your ex without having to go no contact. Grab it for free at breakupcoachdorothy.com. Let's begin the episode. Hello, beautiful Bravehearts. How are you doing? I am so excited today. We have an amazing guest, Gabrielle Stone, here with us today. She's written an amazing book. I want her to tell you everything about it. I actually found you. I didn't tell you this. I actually found you on Instagram. I loved the vibe that you had on Instagram, everything that you were sharing there. It was so fun to kind of watch your journey. I didn't follow it until after you kind of went through everything and right when you started to find out that you were pregnant, you were having a baby. I very much resonate with all of that. And so I was super excited when someone reached out to me via email to do this interview. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to have you here and to hear about your heartbreak journey and for you to inspire so many other Bravehearts who are listening and help them along their journey. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand the microphone over to you. I would love to know if you could just, tell us about you, who you are, what you do, where are you in the world, and then we'll go into more specifics around your breakup story.
Totally. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for that lovely intro. I love that your listeners are called Bravehearts because before I went on my big kind of soul searching epic heartbreak journey, I was in need of that. Like I was needing to become a Braveheart, very much so. So I resonate with that a lot. But yes, my name is Gabrielle Stone. I'm a 2-time bestselling author. Before I became an author, I was working as an actress in LA. And the books kind of happened to me. So I was married for almost 2 years. Found out my husband was having an affair with a 19-year-old for 6 months, filed for divorce, left. And shortly after that, I met this guy, an actor in LA, fell madly in love with each other and had this whirlwind romance that was like, meet my family. I'm going to have babies with this person, like signed, sealed, delivered. That's it. And he invited me on a month-long trip to Italy. 48 hours before we were getting on the plane, he told me he needed to go by himself and broke up with me. And I was absolutely devastated. This man broke my heart like my ex-husband never could have done. And I was sitting on my bed at my mom's house because that's where you move when you're 28 and find out you're getting a divorce, and had a bottle of wine and was in a pool of tears and was like, okay, I can either stay at home heartbroken or I can go travel Europe for a month by myself, which of course the time was terrifying to me. I had never traveled solo unless it was like to go to a film set to meet a bunch of people I was working with. So I decided I was going to go. I took my backpack. I did 6 countries over the span of a month, and I wrote the book, Eat, Pray, FML, about it all.
So good. I love the title. I'm absolutely obsessed.
Thank you.
Amazing. Okay, so I have so many questions as we dive in, and I'm sure we'll get to all of this. But I guess my first question, as you just like opened the floor up so well, is so when you said like that second heartbreak, it was worse or more difficult for you than the affair that your husband had. Why was
Yeah.
that?
I get that question a lot. although I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are nodding their heads in agreement, because the amount of DMs that I get saying, why is it the man that I fell for after, who I was only with for a few months, as opposed to this like 5-year relationship? Why am I so much more devastated about that? So I do know it's a common theme. For me, in this particular scenario, what I realized far after I got out of it was that I was in a love bombing situation. And I know that term gets thrown around all the time recently. We love to talk about narcissists. We love to talk about love bombing. But in my opinion, there's two different kinds of love bombing. There's the love bombing that's done by a narcissist that's very intentional. That's like, I want to shower this person with love so I can really get them in my grasp and then start to manipulate them. And then there's the love bombing that's a little more complicated for people to unpack. And that's when there's someone who has a certain void within themselves and they're looking to desperately fill that void, whether it's a loss that they've experienced or they're lonely or whatever the void may be. They're searching for someone to fill that up to make them feel better. And they meet someone and they're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. This is filling the void. Like, I want more of them. I want more of them. And then the love bombing scenario starts. And when they realize eventually that they're not going to be the person that fills that void, because only you can fill that void within yourself, then they're like, oh, I'm not feeling that good anymore. And they pull away at the height of the honeymoon stage. And that is the situation that happened to me. So here I was thinking I was like desperately in love, being like, of course I had to get divorced. Of course all of this had to happen, because like, look where I am now. I met my soulmate and here we go off to Europe and we're at the height of our honeymoon stage, talking about like years down the road. And all of a sudden it's done. So it was a really, I don't think I had ever, no, I don't know, not think, I know I had never had my heart broken before this experience. And I do think that it's horrible and not fun to go through, but it's so invaluable when people go through heartbreak, because you truly start to learn who you are. You really start to know how strong you are. You really recognize the fact that you can be in such a deep, dark place and pull yourself out of it. And you find out a lot of really intimate things about yourself when you're in that deep, dark place.
So good. And then so you talk about this of like getting to know yourself and showing yourself that you're strong. I feel like you going on that solo trip was kind of the beginning of that. Would you say it was the beginning of that process for you?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I was terrified to take that trip. The only thing I knew about hostels was that there was a horror movie about them and people get brutally murdered in that. Like, we've all seen Taken. I was like, all right, what am I getting myself into? But it ended up being the most incredible experience. I learned more about myself as a human on that trip than my first 28 years of life. It was really a life-changing experience to go get so far outside of my comfort zone and just trust that the universe was going to catch me. I had always had a huge fear of being by myself and being alone. I lost my father pretty traumatically when I was 6 years old. I walked in and found him dead on the floor from a heart attack. And that instilled this fear of abandonment in me. And that was a through line that I carried through my life for years and years. I then lost my high school sweetheart in a car accident when I was 18, and that kind of ripped that wound wide open. And here I was like replaying this abandonment fear over and over. So this really was the universe's clear way of being like, you're going to go face this fear. You're going to be alone in one of the biggest ways possible. And you're going to realize how capable and okay you are. And it was the biggest gift.
Chills. I get chills when you talk about that. So good. So tell me a little bit about so the listeners on my podcast, we talk about thoughts creating feelings. And so from your perspective, what really got you to take the step to go on the trip? Because I'm assuming I could totally be wrong. Maybe you just knew instantly you were going to go on this trip, even though you were terrified. But for me, like when I'm terrified, I almost have to talk myself into doing it and make the decision and commit to that decision. How did you do that? Like, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? Like, what did you tell yourself to get yourself to like go do the trip that you knew you needed to?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason, not in like the toxic positivity way of just like, it's all happening. It's all great. Sometimes it really fucking sucks. But in hindsight, you can look back and be like, okay, I see why that happened, or I see the lessons it brought. I see where it led me. Even like the deaths in my life that, were horrible and traumatic. I still can look back and be like, but this gave me this lesson, or this made me who I am now. And this situation was no exception. So I mentioned that fear of abandonment that I kept replaying out throughout my life. And when we have a subconscious belief, we tend to allow our conscious mind to begin to attract it into our life, even when we're not wanting it. Obviously, I don't want people to come in and abandon me. But if I have a subconscious belief saying I'm going to be abandoned, I'm going to attract people that are going to do that, so that my brain can play it out and be like, oh, see, we're right. We're right. So I was doing that very brilliantly. I attracted my ex-husband, who abandoned me in one of the most heinous ways possible. And the universe was like, cool, are we ready to go heal this, Gabrielle? I was like, not really. I'm going to go over here and attract this guy who's going to literally abandon me 2 days before we're getting on an airplane. And by that time, I was like, I couldn't not see it in my face. It was so clear that these things were being ripped away from me so that I would go and learn how to be by myself and learn how to love myself. So when it all kind of fell apart for a second time, it was so clear that this was now going to make me go be alone. There was no arguing that it all made sense. So the fear was there, but there was never a question of like, am I not going to go? It was like, the other option was sitting at home and watch him go on this trip and be, eating gallons of ice cream and wallowing in my self-pity. And I did not have time to do that after getting a divorce.
You're like, it's a no for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really was just that deep innate knowing that this was all happening for a reason, and really trusting that and knowing that in my soul, and then hyping myself up and being crazy in my head, being like, it's going to be great. You're going to be fine. It's going to be wonderful. And like, don't go into the fear of it.
Yeah, right. So important. I love that. I love that. So you said that you went to Europe, but the trip was originally booked to Italy. I'm sure you talk about this all in your book. So everyone's going to have to go get your book and read it. I'm sure it's hilarious based off of the very little that I know about you. But did you end up going to just Italy, or did you go other places? Where all did you go in Europe?
So our trip was booked from LA to London, and then connecting from London to Rome, which is where we were supposed to start. So yes, we flew on the plane sitting next to each other.
I was just going to ask that. Oh my gosh.
We did. The first exercise in how to get over your ex, I guess, was sitting on an 11-hour flight together. He went on to Rome and I started my trip in London. So it was actually, he did a little bit of Italy, and went through in just the country of Italy. I ended up doing London, Amsterdam, Paris, Barcelona, Mykonos, Rome, and Sicily. So I did like way more than I would have ended up doing initially. But it was London where I started everything.
Wow. How long were you gone for?
1 month. So when I was invited on the trip, he was like, okay, so I'm going on this trip to Italy. I really want you to come with me. I'm leaving on September 4th and I'm coming back on October 4th. And this was when I was like, okay, universe, I hear you. I'll go on the trip. September 4th was going to be my wedding anniversary, my 2-year wedding anniversary. And October 4th is my late father's birthday. So it was very like, okay, I guess we're
all the
taking
signs.
this trip.
Yeah, that's all the signs.
And now September 4th is a day that I and all of my FMLers celebrate, because it became the day that I left on this big, incredible, life-changing trip that really changed the trajectory of my life and my career. So it's a day that I celebrate. Like, it's like a holiday for me and my followers.
That makes me so happy. That's awesome. I love that. That's amazing. Okay, so let's talk about kind of your breakup journey as a whole. I would really love to know what Actually, let's start like what were your biggest pain points when it comes to getting over your ex? What were like the biggest pain points that you had or the struggles that you had getting over this specific ex?
Ugh, it's, that's a lot of what the second book ended up being about, which is like a direct sequel to Eat, Pray, FML, is that struggle. And I remember when I was in the edit process, I was like, this is annoying, man. Like the fact that I'm continuously going back to this person and like can't seem to just get over it. I wonder if people are going to be screaming at me while they're reading this, because like I'm screaming at me while I'm trying to edit this. And that storyline in the second book is one of the most DMs I get, is about like people resonating with that, because it's really real when you're going through a breakup like that. Like, I feel like I can say this, it's sometimes a touchy subject, but I've gone through deaths of people in my life and I've gone through breakups. And for me personally, that breakup was sometimes in ways harder than some of the deaths that I've experienced.
I've
Because when
said the
you're,
same. Yeah, I've said the same thing on here. I lost my biological father, and I feel like my breakup was more difficult. Like grieving someone who's still alive to me is
yep,
also like
yeah,
way more difficult than grieving someone who's passed because you almost feel like
totally.
a level of acceptance,
Well, when
Versus,
someone has passed, they didn't, well, this is, we would get into like a woo-woo conversation, but let's just say for the sake of conversation, they don't choose to leave. Um, when you're grieving someone who's still alive, they're walking around chilling on the planet, just choosing not to be with you. And that is a different level of difficulty to accept and understand. It becomes more complicated when the person on the other end isn't just like, hey, we're done. I don't want to be with you. I don't feel these feelings for you anymore. And in my case, where they're very wishy-washy, they're coming in and kind of breadcrumbing you and then pulling away and being like, no, actually, I don't want to be with you. So then we're sitting on the other end trying to rationalize all of this and being like, well, wait, but they said this, this, and this. So maybe there's, and keeping that hope alive, which is so unhealthy and never 99% of the time works out and just ends up wasting a lot of our time. So to answer your question, the biggest pain points in this for me, and what was the hardest thing for me to get over, was how it made me feel about myself. I would sit there and be like, I've done so much in my life. I've gotten over a divorce. I've gotten over deaths. I've like gone through breakups. Like, why can't I shake this? What's wrong with me that I can't just, like, I have all these people on the outside of my circle being like, he's a fuck boy. What are you doing? Walk away. This is toxic. And I could not do it. And it made me feel shitty about myself.
yep.
And therefore resented him and the relationship and myself. Like, it was just a
Mm-hmm.
big toxic triangle of shitty feelings
Yeah.
that I could not push aside. Now, obviously, in hindsight, looking back on it, I see why I had to go through all of those patterns and like going back and trying to separate, because I learned so much from it. And I don't think the relationship that I'm in now with my husband would be as strong if I didn't go through all those steps with getting over my ex, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. But
Absolutely.
it was really the shittiness it made me feel about myself that I couldn't navigate it quicker. Although, like, what's the timeline that people are setting on us? That was all
Mm-hmm.
like my own mentality, but I
Yeah.
think that would be it. And it, of course, it plugged me into all of the abandonment stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like every time he would pop into my life and then leave, it was hitting my biggest pain point, which was
Yeah.
the fear of abandonment.
Mm-hmm. It's wild the things that we make a breakup mean about ourselves. It's wild.
Yeah,
Every single time I see it over and over and over again. It's so difficult not to make it mean something about you, even though it's so much about what is going on for them.
totally. And if like I would have just taken a step back, and I tell so many people this when they're like, okay, but he hearted my response, so that must mean something. It's like, no, that's the bare fucking minimum. And if we could just accept like this individual doesn't like me that much or enough, like we would save ourselves so much time. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy.
Yep.
What we rationalize and what we make okay and what we accept. Like when my husband came into my life, it was like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. Like, it doesn't matter that he has a kid and he's busy and there's like all these things that are being juggled. He still texts me all the time because he wants to talk to me. Like the phrase, if he wanted to, he would, is the realist phrase that we have created in all of this craziness. And I tell people that they need to live by that.
I love that. Amazing. It's almost like taking things for face value.
Yes,
Mhm.
100%.
I love it. So, what do you feel like was most helpful along your breakup journey?
Oh, I feel like looking at the facts, because so many times we can get into, again, like that rationalizing, and like we have those like love goggles on and we're just like, oh, but this could mean this. And maybe he will come around and do this. But when you sit down and write out the facts of a situation, it becomes very hard to argue if those are a list of things that you deserve. So for
Mhm.
me, sitting down and writing out like, he is blank or he did blank blank, like specific things of like, he didn't call me when, or he like dropped off the face of the earth for these 2 months, or he chose to break up with you, he chose to not go with you, like things that were unarguable facts. Reading those really allowed me to be like, okay, this is not something I deserve.
Yeah, it's like facts versus drama.
100%. Yeah.
I love that. Amazing. What do you feel like was some of the worst advice that you got?
To get over someone, get under someone else.
Oh, I know. That's such a common one
um,
too, isn't it?
I display it very well how it doesn't work in my book. Again, do I like regret those things? No, because they all brought me somewhere and led me to uncovering things that I myself needed to heal. But I always look, if you're in a good, healthy mental place and you want to go out and have some drinks and like have a wild night with someone, more power to you, girl. But if you are doing it from a place of I'm fucking sad and I need to feel better, so like maybe using my body can help me do that, that is where I caution you and say, sit with yourself for a while and maybe pump the brakes on jumping into bed with someone else until you're a little bit more healed.
Yeah, I've done that. And then I just feel worse like at the end. Like after it, I just feel
Same.
worse.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You really just, as long as you're doing anything in life from the right intention and the right space, I think it's like totally fine. Like be wild, be free, party, do your thing. But if it's coming from a place of like, I'm trying to make myself feel better or I don't want to feel abandoned, like I had a lot of deep rooted sexual trauma that came to the surface when I started like being like, okay, why do I keep trying to like be intimate with people to make myself feel better? So there's a lot of stuff written about in the book where I sort of dive into that and unpack a lot of that.
Amazing. Amazing. Another question that I have is what would you tell this past version of you? So like the version of you, I almost kind of envision the version of you that's sitting on your mom's like bed, you said, or couch or whatever, and you're at your
Yeah.
mom's house. You're like, I'm about to go to Europe solo when I thought I was going to be going on this trip. What would you tell that version of you? Because I think there's a lot of listeners who are literally in that same spot.
Yeah. Um, it's all going to be worth it. You're doing the right thing. And don't put so much weight on the guy. Like, I think, and again, this had to play out the way that it did for a myriad of different reasons for my own personal healing journey. But I wish I wouldn't have like relied so heavily on what the crumbs he was giving me. And I would have just kind of shut that door to move on. But
Yeah,
you know.
I love that. I love that. I love it. So tell us, how can people find you? I know they're going to want to hang out with you on Instagram. I know they're going to want to read both of your books. I want them to be able to find you. How can they find you?
Yeah, come hang out. My Instagram is like my open diary. I'm maybe too personal on that in my
It's
podcast,
so
but you
fun
know.
though. I'm sorry to interrupt. I have to interrupt because her Instagram is so fun to watch. You just seem like such a fun person. And I feel like it just comes
Oh,
through so easily for you on Instagram. And I'm like, I love it. I love watching your journey. So
thank
I
you.
love it. You've created an amazing community there.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. I decided when I was going on this Europe trip, because I was originally going to kind of like take a social media break, and I posted kind of this photo of me, which all of my Europe pictures are still up there. And when people are reading, they're like following along like a picture book. But I thought I was going to take a social media break. I ended up posting this picture of me in my backpack, kind of like announcing my divorce and what I'd been through for the first time. And I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages and comments of people being like, this inspired me to keep going. Please keep sharing your journey. I resonated with this. So I made the decision that I was going to show up in a very authentic way and not make my life a highlight reel, because that's the biggest toxic trait of social media, is that people don't really show what's going on in their lives in an authentic way. So I really have committed to doing that while I've been, in the public eye on Instagram. So thank you. I'm glad that came across. But you guys can come hang with me at Gabrielle Stone on Instagram, and on TikTok, I'm at Gabrielle_Stone. If you want to grab the books, they're exclusively on Amazon. The first one is Eat, Pray, FML. The second is The Ridiculous Misadventures of a Single Girl. They're also both available signed on my website, where I also have a self-love healing journal called Fuck Off, I'm Healing, which takes you kind of step by step through undoing some of the trauma and bullshit life has thrown at you.
She has some really cool merch there too. I looked at
I
your
do.
merch and I was like, I love the merch.
I love it.
So fun.
I'll send you something.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited. So I'll definitely go ahead. Everyone listening, I'll link that in the show notes for you so it's easy to click and get to. But thank you so much for your time, Gabrielle. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your words of wisdom. I know it's going to be super helpful to all the brave hearts listening. We really, really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. And if I can leave the brave hearts with one final thing, no matter how dark it may seem where you're at right now, I promise you there is a light at the end of the tunnel, even if you cannot see it. So put one foot in front of the other and just keep going, because it is so magical once you get there.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you're loving the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast and you'd like to learn how to fast forward getting over your ex without spending months or years feeling angry, jealous, or unlovable, I would love to personally invite you to participate in our free on-demand video training, where we share 3 mind-blowing moments that will forever change your experience with your breakup or divorce. Come check it out at breakupcoachdorothy.com.